Clearances for water heaters, this is more common sense. I really don't know if it's set in stone anywhere, but you're going to have to replace that water heater at some point in time. And I think we should give consideration to how am I going to get it out of there. And when that water heater gets replaced, it's going to be filled with so much crud and you're not going to be able to drain it. That thing's going to be heavy as there's no tomorrow. It is not an enjoyable thing to do. You're going to need a couple of young people. So 2 feet is pretty much a good amount of room. But if it was less, I think I might make mention of it. But I can't tell people to move walls, appliances, water heaters. It's just not in me to recommend that. So, dip tube we talked about brings the water down to the bottom. If it breaks, then we end up getting short cycling on everything. Anode rod, we kind of chatted on that as well. That's designed to be eaten away before the water heater gets eaten away. It always reminds me of somebody's first day on the job. I always recommend that they bring in donuts. And they go, well, why do I have to bring in donuts on your first day of the job? And then I tell them, you feed the animals before they eat you. So same thing with this anode rod. Let's let the bad stuff eat the anode rod before it eats the water heater. Temperature controls. 120 is kind of our magic number for a safe range. And again, this is all how much risk are you willing to take? For us, we shoot water flow with the thermal imagers so we can take a temperature of that coming out of there. But I'll openly admit, even my water heater here is set at 140 degrees. So water that's coming out of our spigots, our faucets, is going to be 140. 20 degrees over the safe range on that. But I don't have any infants, and I think I am the elderly person living in this house. So, those are going to be the 2 people that are going to get harmed the most, and I'm willing to accept that. Although I will be honest, I mix it with cold water anyways, so why not just leave it at 120? It is a tankless water heater. I think that also means that my cleanup will be less as well, or my flushing would be less often if I left it at 120. But everybody else in my house likes it at 140, so that's where we leave it. But realize it does cause burns. I think I will put this chart up on there too. I think it's useful. We got it from the Shriners. And different temperatures on different skins. And it's amazing how fast at 140 degrees you could burn a baby's skin, in just a matter of seconds. So I don't know what much more to say. So 1st degree burn is a sunburn, just the surface. 2nd degree burn, you start getting blisters. And 3rd degree burn, you burn all the way through the skin, and you basically have to replace the skin or wait till it grows, or get it to grow back. It is permanent tissue damage. So contained water will create 150 psi at 300 degrees. One of my favorite shows used to be Mythbusters, and they actually blew up a water heater by disabling all the safety features on it and keeping it getting hotter and hotter and hotter. I think they got it up to about 315 degrees. Don't quote me on that number, but it was damn well right in that ballpark. And then finally, all the liquid wanted to turn to steam, more so than what the vessel or the water tank can hold, and it exploded like a missile, and it just tore the house down. So a rupturing tank, I do want you to know this term too. It is an acronym. It's called a BLEVE, and it stands for Boiling Liquid Expanding Vapor Explosion. All right, a BLEVE. I'll back up real quick. Well, we'll just talk about it. When that, I have seen it once, where a pressure relief valve opened up, and was allowing all that steam to enter the building. It was at a downtown floor shop in Northbrook. The shut-off device, so the flame was on, it's staying on, kept getting that water heated up, so much so that it released on the pressure relief valve, and the entire room that this water heater was in there, and it must have been probably a 50-foot by maybe 100-foot, was filled with steam, and that steam set off the fire alarm. So we responded. We go in there. This room is filled with steam. I hear the steam going, and I was able to see down low where it was, that it was the water heater. And we just went there. We turned the gas off to the water heater, and then the pressure relief valve finally closed. Everything cooled down, and the problems went away. All right. But I would like you to get an idea of how these pressure relief valves work. All right. In a nutshell, there's two different devices. It depends if it's a temperature relief valve or a pressure relief valve. So the temperature relief valve, that's that wax fill. We'll go to the bottom picture first. That wax fill that's there, they have different colored wax that gets in there, depending on where this thing is going to be set at. And when that opens, it stays open. So the wax changes size, opens the poppet valve, and then water will continue to flow coming out of there. Most temperature pressure relief valves for water heaters are set at 210 degrees. So we would never get to that boiling point where it is. The pressure, which is that spring loaded on the poppet valve, that's going to open up at 150 degrees for a water heater. Now it is less they do have smaller ones that open up at lower pressures, but typically those are for hydronic systems or steam systems. Water heaters are 150 psi. I do want you to remember that number. Now, if it gets corroded inside, then you can see where the spring and the mechanisms of the poppet valve is on there. If that's corroded in there or it starts to leak, and whatever you do, don't lift that lever up at the top there, because yeah, you can lift it and you can open it manually and you can get water to flow out of it manually, but they just never seep back. All right, there's always going to be some little piece of debris, something that's going to give it a slow leak, something that's going to create a problem, and that water slowly leaking through there will create that corrosion. What I would like to encourage you to do is spin it, and if you spin that pressure relief valve, then if it spins easily, chances are it's not corroded. If you have to give it some pressure and then it spins easily, it's corroded in there. All right. If you can't spin it at all and it's so tight in there, it's corroded in there. If it's corroded, it may not open when we need it to open. All right. And that spring in itself is going to hold it at 150 psi. If the corrosion of that makes it up to maybe 160 psi, then the tank might become the weak link, and that could levy. And when these things go, again, I'd like you to watch that video on Mythbusters, and you'll see it's just a big boom. That's all I could put on there. And it just destroys the little house that they built on it. This is the pressure relief valve we found in the house. We did not hook this up this way. If you look at the arrow pointing on there, it's actually pointing towards the tank, all right? So, I mean, somebody had to do some configuring to make this happen. They had to put in there a nipple in order to get a male threaded into the tank and then put the female to thread into the exhaust of the pressure relief valve, all right? And then they went ahead and put another female fitting on the bottom end. The water will not go backwards. All right, this is the same thing as a valve that comes in there. And it was funny, at this point in time, we would have 15 people doing our field trainings. You know, the rules have changed since then. We limit the size of the groups now. But out of the 15 people, including myself, all right, only one person caught this. And, you know, we just saw a pressure relief valve. Okay, that's cool, it's there. And nobody really ended up taking a close look at it. But one person goes, hey, how come this arrow's pointing the wrong way? And then all of a sudden you look at it and you're like, holy cow, that's dangerous. All right. So again, take your time, look at it, even if it's tedious. Do what you can to make sure that it's going to be working right. All right. Fallen baffles, we should see them hanging at the very top, right through the draft hood. If those little hangers break off and this falls to the bottom, it usually disrupts the flame and and it might damage the burners. Those burners underneath there are flimsy. They don't have any strength to it. So if something comes down and gives it a good whack, then it knocks it out of alignment pretty quick and easy. Isolation valves, drain valves, I think these are pretty much self-explanatory. I don't open them, I don't flush them, I don't do anything with them other than knowing that they're there. It's kind of weird. Part of me wants to open it and see if it'll flush because I don't want to ever get that call where my clients open it up to flush it and now it's continuously leaking and I didn't test it. But truthfully, I don't think any of my clients have ever tested that or really flushed it. It's not in our society to do such. So I've never had a complaint call from an isolation valve leaking on that or a drain valve leaking. It just doesn't happen. Going back to nationwide testing, so the National Home Inspector exam is a nationwide test. So they are going to be asking you questions about different parts of the country. We are not in the Chicagoland area or Illinois. We are not in a seismic zone. So we're not required to put the seismic strapping onto our water heaters, all right? But if it is in a zone such as California where they have their earthquakes, I want you to know that there's 2 straps that need to be on there. I want you to know that there's 2 straps that need to be on there. And those 2 straps should be 1/3 high and 1/3 low. They should be fastened to the structure. And then the other thing, if you look at the bottom left, you're going to see that it's connected with a flexible appliance connector, just like we would do with a stove or a dryer. And the purpose of that is that if this thing does fall off the wall and does trip over, that it's not going to break the gas pipe. It might have a slow leak to it, but it's not going to break the pipe and you get a big leak coming out of there, all right? So Mark asked a question about do you let your clients know they should drain the water heater periodically? We have items like that pre-written in our report that, basically some gentle maintenance tips, and yes, that is in there. Do I verbally tell them that? No, I do not. So all right, this one was just kind of a no-brainer. We got a gas water heater up on there, and there's no vent connector on the top. We also have a pressure relief valve on there that doesn't have a discharge tube as well. Those blue and red escutcheon plates that are on the top of the water heater where the pipes go in, I do want you to take note of those. Whenever we see backdrafting from a water heater, those are the first things that usually end up melting. So if you start seeing them deformed in any which way, it's a pretty strong indicator that that water heater has or is backdrafting. If they've been removed and cleaned up off the top of it, we really should start getting suspicious. Most people aren't going to remove those unless they're, trying to avoid something that we would find or something that would be called out. All right. Sometimes we're going to run into multiple water heaters, and there's 2 different ways to do it. I'm kind of in the minority on what I like to see when people do this sort of stuff, but the vast majority are going to put them in what we call series, all right? And I stand corrected. The vast majority of the plumbers are going to put them in what we call parallel, and that's what we're looking at right now. So basically the cold water comes in and it splits off, goes to both water heaters, and then the same thing with the hot water when it comes back. They both come together, and then that feeds the hot water to the house. Theoretically, everything, as long as they're equal, water's going to flow down the same line, plain and simple, all right? If they're different and different directions, water flow and friction loss all has to do the same with pressure differentials. So if I have the same pressure on both sides of them, water's really only going to flow down the path of least resistance. So you're going to end up using one water heater. Now, I've mentioned this, and I've had plumbers call me out when I had different water heaters, different lengths, and they said I was full of poop, and I was totally wrong. But then we start running the hot water and just let it run, and the next thing you know is only one water heater is turning on and off, and the other one's just sitting there. So we keep running until we run out of hot water on everything, and the one with the longer run just never turned on at all. So I firmly believe this is true, and anytime I see them in parallel, I do check and make sure that the distance between A and B, as shown on these diagrams, is identical. And the same thing for the hot water side. And both water heaters have to be identical. And I'm talking not just the same manufacturer, same year, same manufacturer, same size, same height. We can't do anything that's going to change the flow. All right. So this is one of those hills that I kind of die on, especially if somebody wants to fill up a big tub and they're having trouble doing it. I'm actually going to try and fill up that big tub and see if we can succeed in doing it. For me, the easier solution is to put them in series. Now here, you can see the cold water goes into one water heater, and then the hot water comes out of there and goes in through the dip tube into the second water heater, which goes ahead and feeds it to the house. So as I'm using the hot water from the left water heater, I'm actually replacing it with more hot water. So I'm going to get the longer lifespan out of it. And when I run out of the hot water on the right water heater, now the cold water is going to start coming in there, but even that's going to be lukewarm. And to me, it's just a way to use all the hot water. It's just all the hot water is just an easier, more verified way that it's going to happen. Now the drawback to this. The only water heater that's really going to be doing most of the work is the one on the right. The one on the left is just going to be maintaining temperature unless you start exhausting all the hot water in the system, and that's the only time that's going to be doing it. Otherwise, they'll just mate. So the one on the left will last longer. The one on the right will fail soon or sooner. All right, but no sooner if you had only one water heater. All right, it would be the same. So, and then you don't have to replace both. You can just replace the one water heater and everything will still work fine. So just my opinion, my 2 cents and how I feel about it. I'm not going to tell anyone to repipe anything. I don't have that in me. But I do want to give them fair warning if they are going to run out of hot water. So